The key to conscious reality creation is learning to retune your consciousness to the frequency of the timeline you prefer to experience. However, Zealand identified a major obstacle to conscious timeline navigation. Welcome to the Reality Revolution. This is the Reality Creation Masterclass from Novice to Timeline Architect. Right now, as you listen to these words, you are participating in the most profound discovery in human history. Not fire, which gave us warmth and light. Not the wheel, which revolutionized transportation. Not even electricity, which transformed civilization itself. The discovery I'm speaking of dwarfs all of these because it reveals something far more fundamental. Consciousness itself is the creative force that shapes reality. This is not some modern New Age fantasy born from wishful thinking. This understanding has been the cornerstone of the world's most ancient wisdom traditions for thousands of years. The mystics of Egypt encoded it in their sacred hieroglyphs. The sages of India wove it into the Vedas. The Hebrew Kabbalists mapped it in the Tree of Life. Buddhist masters taught it as the nature of mind itself. And now, quantum physics and neuroscience are providing the mathematical and biological proof that validates what these ancient teachers always knew. The reason this discovery is so revolutionary is that it fundamentally redefines what it means to be human. For centuries, we've been taught that we are passive observers in a random universe, victims of circumstance and genetics, powerless to change our fundamental experience of life. This mechanistic worldview has created a species that feels separate, small, and limited, constantly struggling against forces beyond their control. But consciousness research is revealing something extraordinary. Your brain doesn't just receive reality, it actively constructs it. Quantum mechanics shows us that the act of observation changes the behavior of subatomic particles. Neuroscience demonstrates that your thoughts reshape your neural pathways in real time. Epigenetics proves that your beliefs and emotions can alter your genetic expressions within minutes. The placebo effect reveals that expectation alone can trigger profound healing responses that conventional medicine cannot explain. These aren't isolated phenomena. They're glimpses of a unified principle that ancient teachers understood intuitively, and modern science is now measuring with increasing precision. Consciousness isn't produced by the brain. It's the fundamental field from which all experience emerges. You aren't living in reality. You are creating reality through the very act of conscious awareness. This understanding changes everything because it transforms you from a victim of circumstances into the architect of your experience. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every belief you hold is actively shaping the quantum field around you, organizing probability waves into the specific patterns of experience you call your life. The mystics called this the creative power of divine consciousness. Scientists called it the observer effect and neuroplasticity. But they're describing the same phenomenon. Your awareness is continuously sculpting reality from the infinite field of possibilities. Today, you're going to discover how to harness this creative force consciously and deliberately. You will learn from the greatest teachers who have ever lived, both ancient and modern, and understand how their insights fit together into a complete system for reality creation. This isn't theory or philosophy. This is a practical technology for transforming your life by working with the fundamental principles that govern how consciousness creates experience. You're about to become a master of the most important skill any human being can develop: the ability to create reality through conscious intention rather than unconscious reaction. This is your birthright, your natural capability, and your greatest opportunity for evolution. The only question is whether you're ready to claim the creative power that has always been yours. To understand the magnitude of what you're about to learn, you need to appreciate that you stand on the shoulders of giants. The reality creation principles that we'll explore today were not discovered overnight by a single teacher. I have done my best to document and share these reality creation insights with my podcast by providing the teachings of dozens of teachers. These principles represent the accumulated wisdom of remarkable individuals who each unveiled a crucial piece of how consciousness shapes experience. These master teachers blazed trails through uncharted territory, often facing ridicule and resistance, to bring you the complete map of reality creation. Imagine reality creation as a vast cathedral of knowledge that took centuries to construct. Each master teacher we're about to explore contributed essential architectural elements: the foundation, the pillars, the sacred geometry, the illuminating windows. Without any single contribution, the structure would be incomplete. With all of them working together, we have a magnificent edifice of understanding that can transform any human life. Now, in the early 20th century, a mystic named Neville Goddard made a discovery that changed everything about how we understand the creative process. Neville revealed that imagination isn't just daydreaming or fantasy. It's the fundamental mechanism through which consciousness creates physical reality. He demonstrated that when you imagine a scene with sufficient vividness and emotional intensity, particularly in the drowsy state before sleep, you're not just visualizing, you're actually creating. Neville's profound insight was that feeling is the secret. You could imagine wealth all day long, but if you felt poor while doing it, poverty would remain your experience. However, when you could genuinely feel the reality of your imagined scene, when you could step into it so completely that it became more real than your current circumstances, that imagined reality would inevitably manifest in your physical world. What made Neville's approach revolutionary was his understanding that the creative power traditionally attributed to an external God actually resided within human consciousness itself. He taught that your imagination is God in action, that every scene you hold in your mind with feeling becomes a seed planted in the field of infinite possibilities. This wasn't metaphor to Neville. This was the actual mechanism by which all reality comes into being. Now, building upon Neville's foundation, Dr. Joseph Murphy unlocked the technical understanding of how imagination's creative power actually operates. Murphy discovered that the subconscious mind functions like the most sophisticated computer ever created, one that doesn't distinguish between imagined and actual experiences, and faithfully reproduces whatever programming it receives. Murphy's breakthrough was recognizing that the subconscious mind is the bridge between consciousness and physical manifestation. When you program your subconscious with clear images, emotions, and beliefs about your desired reality. It begins reorganizing your thoughts, actions, and circumstances to make that programming manifest in your external world. Murphy showed that you don't need to figure out how your desires will manifest. You simply need to install the right programming and let your subconscious handle the execution. This understanding transformed reality creation from mystical art into practical science. Murphy observed the technical manual for consciousness, showing exactly how beliefs become biology, how thoughts become things, and how properly programmed expectations become inevitable experiences. I've done my best to share a number of lectures from both Neville and Joseph Murphy that you can access on this channel by just checking out the Joseph Murphy and Neville Goddard playlists. But the imagination and the subconscious is just the beginning. Then we come to Vadim Zealand. In the late 20th century, a Russian quantum physicist named Vadim Zealand made a discovery that revolutionized how we understand the structure of reality itself. Through his reality transurfing work, Zealand revealed that reality isn't a single fixed timeline, but rather an infinite space of variations, parallel realities existing simultaneously like different channels on a cosmic television. Zealand's profound contribution was showing that you don't have to create your desired reality from scratch. It already exists as one of countless timeline variations. Your consciousness acts like a tuning fork, resonating with specific reality channels based on your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. When you change your internal frequency, you quite simply slide from one timeline to another, accessing realities where your desires already exist. Perhaps even more importantly, Zealand identified the mental and emotional patterns that trap consciousness in limiting timeline loops. He called these patterns pendulums, destructive thought structures that feed on human attention and keep people cycling through the same restrictive experiences. By learning to recognize and avoid these pendulums while consciously selecting your reality frequency, you gain the ability to navigate between infinite versions of your life. Now, beyond Goddard, Murphy, and Zealand, you come to Dr. Joe. Dr. Joe Despenza brought reality creation into the age of measurable science by demonstrating the neurobiological mechanisms that make consciousness-directed change possible. Through his research into neuroplasticity, epigenetics, and quantum field theory, Despenza showed that when you combine clear intention with elevated emotion, you create measurable changes in your brain structure, genetic expression, and electromagnetic field. Despenza's revolutionary insight was that you don't have to wait for external circumstances to change before you can feel differently. You can generate the emotions of your desired future right now, and those elevated emotional states will begin rewiring your brain and body to match your intended reality. When you feel grateful before you have reason to be grateful, when you feel abundant before abundance appears, you're not being delusional. You're engaging the biological mechanism that creates the reality you're feeling. His work bridges the gap between ancient wisdom and modern science, providing brain scans, blood tests, and genetic analysis that prove what mystics have always known. Consciousness has the power to reshape reality at the most fundamental biological levels. Beyond Dr. Joe, you have Dr. Cynthia Sue Larson, who completed our understanding by revealing the quantum mechanical foundation that makes all reality shifting possible. Through her research into quantum jumping and reality shifting, Larson demonstrated that consciousness operates according to quantum principles, meaning you can quite simply shift between parallel versions of reality where different possibilities have already manifested. Larson's work shows that at the quantum level, all possibilities exist simultaneously until consciousness collapses them into specific experiences through the act of observation and intention. This means your desired reality isn't something you need to create. It's something you need to select from the infinite quantum supermarket of existing possibilities. Her practical approach to quantum jumping provides the technical framework for consciously shifting between timeline variations, accessing realities where you've made different choices, taken different paths, and created different outcomes. Larson proves that reality shifting isn't just theoretical physics. It's a learnable skill that anyone can develop. Now, each of these masters contributed an essential element to your understanding. Neville gave you the creative power of imagination. Murphy provided the programming technology of the subconscious. Zealand mapped the navigational structure of parallel realities. Despenza explained the biological implementation mechanisms, and Larson revealed the quantum foundation that makes it all possible. You're not starting from zero today. You're inheriting centuries of accumulated wisdom, tested principles, and proven methods. You stand at the convergent point where ancient mystical knowledge meets cutting-edge scientific understanding, where imagination meets neuroscience, where quantum mechanics meets practical application. This knowledge doesn't belong to any single teacher or tradition. It belongs to consciousness itself, which means it belongs to you. Now that you understand the lineage of wisdom you're inheriting, let me show you how these scattered discoveries actually form a unified architecture for reality creation. Think of these 5 pillars as the fundamental support columns that hold up the entire structure of conscious manifestation. Each pillar is essential. Each one strengthens the others, and together they create a framework so powerful that it can support any reality you choose to build. What makes this framework revolutionary is that it integrates insights from mystical traditions, psychological research, quantum physics, and neuroscience into a single, coherent system. You're not learning 5 separate techniques. You're discovering 5 aspects of one unified process that governs how consciousness creates experience at every level of existence. The first pillar is the creative power of imagination, the fundamental force that shapes reality. The first pillar establishes the most foundational truth about consciousness. Your imagination is not fantasy or escapism, but the actual creative mechanism through which reality comes into being. When Neville Goddard discovered this principle, he revolutionized human understanding by showing that imagination, when properly directed and emotionally activated, functions as the engineering department of consciousness. Think about this carefully. Every single thing in your current reality began as an image in someone's imagination. The chair you're sitting on existed first in the mind of its designer. The building around you was conceived in an architect's imagination. Even your own body began as images held in the consciousness of your parents. Imagination isn't separate from reality. It's the foundational layer from which all physical manifestation emerges. But here's what most people misunderstand about imagination's creative power. It's not enough to simply visualize what you want. The images must be felt as real, experienced as present in first person, and embodied as already accomplished. When you imagine something while simultaneously knowing it's just imagination, you're essentially telling the universe, this is not real, please don't manifest it. However, when you imagine so vividly that the imagined scene feels more real than your current circumstances, you've engaged imagination's true creative power. Neville taught a technique he called living in the end. Constructing mental scenes that imply your desire has already been fulfilled. Then, experiencing those scenes with such emotional intensity that they become more real to your consciousness than your current physical situation. This isn't self-deception, it's consciousness programming. You're literally installing new reality software by feeding your awareness images of the life you want to experience. The key insight here is that consciousness doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and physical ones when those imagined experiences are felt as real. Your brain, your emotions, and your energy field respond to felt imagination exactly as they would to physical reality. This means that every time you imagine your desired life with genuine feeling, you're not just hoping for change. You're actually becoming the person who lives that reality. The second pillar is subconscious programming and belief systems, the operating system that executes your reality. The second pillar reveals how your imagined realities actually translate into physical manifestation through the sophisticated programming system of your subconscious mind. Joseph Murphy's teachings showed that the subconscious functions like the most advanced computer ever created, one that faithfully executes whatever programs you install, regardless of whether those programs serve your conscious desires or not. Understanding your subconscious mind is crucial because it operates as the bridge between your consciousness and manifestation. While your conscious mind can imagine and intend, your subconscious mind actually organizes your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and circumstances to create the reality that matches its programming. This is why you can consciously want abundance while unconsciously creating scarcity. Your subconscious programming overrides your conscious intentions every time. The subconscious mind has several characteristics that make it the perfect reality creation mechanism. First, it never sleeps. It's continuously processing information and organizing your experience 24 hours a day. Second, it doesn't analyze or judge. It simply accepts whatever programming you provide and works tirelessly to make that programming manifest in your external world. Third, it controls all the automatic functions of your body and mind, which means it has the power to align your entire system with your programmed reality. Most importantly, the subconscious mind cannot distinguish between imagined and actual experiences when those imagined experiences are repeated with emotional intensity. This is why Murphy's techniques work so effectively. When you repeatedly imagine your desired reality while in relaxed, receptive states, you are reprogramming your subconscious to create that reality automatically. Your beliefs function as the core operating system that determines what kind of programs your subconscious can run. If you believe you're capable of great success, your subconscious will accept and execute programs for achievement and abundance. If you believe you're limited or unworthy, your subconscious will reject positive programming and default to limitation patterns. This is why changing beliefs is so crucial. You're not just changing thoughts, you're upgrading the entire operating system that creates your experience. The practical application of this pillar involves learning to communicate with your subconscious in its native language of images, emotions, and repetition. When you consistently feed your subconscious vivid, emotionally charged scenes of your desired reality, especially during naturally receptive states before sleep and upon waking, you're installing new programming that will automatically begin manifesting in your external world. The third pillar is timeline navigation and pendulum awareness, understanding reality's navigational structure. The third pillar revolutionizes how you understand the nature of reality itself by revealing that what you call your life is actually one timeline among infinite possibilities that exist simultaneously in the quantum field. Vadim Zealand's reality transurfing work shows that consciousness doesn't create reality from nothing. It navigates between existing realities by choosing which timeline to experience. This understanding completely transforms the manifestation process because it means you don't have to create your desired reality from scratch. Every possible version of your life already exists as a potential timeline in what Zealand calls the space of variations. Your consciousness acts like a tuning fork, resonating with specific timeline frequencies based on your habitual thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. When you change your internal frequency, you slide from one timeline to another. Think of timeline navigation like choosing between radio stations. All the stations are broadcasting simultaneously, but you only hear the one the radio is tuned to. Similarly, all possible versions of your life are existing simultaneously, but you only experience the timeline your consciousness is tuned to. Zealand is not saying that these are physical realities, but these are an informational space within the space of variations. The key to conscious reality creation is learning to retune your consciousness to the frequency of the timeline you prefer to experience. However, Zealand identified a major obstacle to conscious timeline navigation: destructive thought structures he called pendulums. These are energetic patterns created by collective human thinking that trap consciousness in limiting timeline loops. Pendulums feed on human attention and emotional energy, creating self-perpetuating cycles of drama, struggle, and limitation. When you get caught in pendulum thinking, you lose your ability to think for yourself and to navigate timelines consciously, and instead get dragged along predetermined paths of limitation. Learning to recognize and avoid pendulum patterns is essential for conscious timeline navigation. This means developing the awareness to notice when your thoughts and emotions are being hijacked by the collective negativity, media manipulation, or other people's dramas. When you maintain emotional equilibrium and mental clarity, you preserve your power to choose which timeline you experience, rather than being swept along by destructive currents. The practical application of this pillar involves learning to identify the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that characterize your desired timeline, then consistently embodying those patterns until you slide into that reality. You also develop pendulum awareness, learning to maintain your emotional and mental sovereignty so you can navigate between timelines based on your own conscious choice rather than unconscious reaction manipulated by the pendulum. The fourth pillar is neuroplasticity and elevated emotions, the biological implementation of reality change. The fourth pillar bridges mystical understanding with measurable science by revealing the neurobiological mechanisms that make reality transformation possible. Joe Despenza's groundbreaking research demonstrates that when you combine clear intention with elevated emotion, you create measurable changes in your brain structure, genetic expression, and electromagnetic field that actually implement your desired reality at the biological level. This pillar is revolutionary because it proves that reality creation isn't just metaphysical philosophy, it's practical neuroscience. Your brain possesses something called neuroplasticity, which means it continuously rewires itself based on your thoughts, emotions, and experiences. When you repeatedly think new thoughts and feel new emotions, you're building new neural networks that support your desired reality while weakening old networks that maintained your previous limitations. But here's the crucial insight that most people miss. Your brain doesn't change based on what you experience. It changes based on what you imagine experiencing, provided you generate the appropriate emotional states. When you visualize your ideal life while feeling genuine gratitude, joy, and excitement about that vision, your brain begins building the neural networks that would naturally exist if you were actually living that life. Despenza's research shows that elevated emotions like gratitude, love, joy, and inspiration carry specific electromagnetic frequencies that actually alter your genetic expression. When you maintain these elevated emotional states consistently, you're not just feeling good, you're reprogramming your DNA to support health, creativity, and expanded capability. Your emotions become the bridge between consciousness and biology, translating your mental intentions into physical transformation. The key to applying this pillar effectively is learning to generate the emotional states of your desired future before that future manifests physically, instead of waiting for external circumstances to make you feel abundant, successful, or fulfilled. You cultivate those feelings first through conscious, emotional elevation. This is not just positive thinking, it's a biological programming that gives your brain and body the neurochemical instructions to create the reality that matches those elevated states. This means that every time you meditate on your desired future while feeling genuinely grateful for its fulfillment, every time you visualize success while experiencing the joy of achievement, every time you imagine love while feeling the warmth of connection, you're becoming the person who lives that reality at the cellular level. Your biology begins to match your imagination, creating the internal foundation that must precede external manifestation. The fifth pillar is quantum possibility and parallel realities, the foundation that makes everything possible. The fifth and final pillar provides the quantum mechanical foundation that explains how all reality creation is actually possible. Cynthia Sue Larson's research into quantum jumping reveals that consciousness operates according to quantum principles, which means you can deliberately shift between parallel versions of reality where different possibilities have already manifested into physical form. At the quantum level, physics has discovered something extraordinary. All possibilities exist simultaneously in what scientists call superposition, until consciousness collapses them into specific experiences through observation and intention. This isn't theoretical, this is measurable science that explains why consciousness has the power to change reality. You're not creating something from nothing when you manifest your desires. You're selecting from infinite existing possibilities and collapsing them into your experienced timeline. This understanding revolutionizes manifestation because it means your desired reality isn't something you need to build piece by piece over time. Instead, there already exists a parallel version of reality where you have perfect health, abundant wealth, loving relationships, and fulfilling purpose. Your consciousness has the ability to quantum jump between these parallel realities, shifting from timelines where you experience limitation to timelines where you experience your highest possibilities. Larson's work demonstrates that quantum jumping is not theoretical. It's a practical skill that anyone can develop. When you learn to shift your consciousness to match the frequency of your desired parallel reality, you jump between quantum states of existence. This explains why some manifestations happen instantly while others seem to take forever. Instant manifestations occur when consciousness successfully jumps to a parallel reality where the desired outcome already exists. Delayed manifestations happen when consciousness tries to change circumstances within a limiting timeline rather than shifting to a timeline where those circumstances are already different. The practical application of this pillar involves learning to identify the quantum signature of your desired reality and then shifting your consciousness to match that signature precisely. This requires developing the ability to feel, think, and perceive from the perspective of the parallel version of yourself who already lives your ideal life. When you can maintain this quantum alignment consistently, you naturally slide between realities until you find yourself living the life you previously only imagined. Now that you understand these 5 fundamental pillars, let me show you how they integrate into something far more powerful than any single approach could achieve alone. What I call timeline shifting represents the complete synthesis and evolution of all these teachings, creating a unified system that addresses the limitations of traditional manifestation approaches while exponentially amplifying their effectiveness. Here's the crucial distinction that changes everything. Most manifestation teachings focus on trying to change your circumstances within your current timeline. They teach you to visualize, affirm, and take action to gradually modify your existing reality. While these approaches can work, they often encounter enormous resistance because they're essentially trying to push against the momentum of your current timeline's established patterns. Timeline shifting operates on an entirely different principle. Instead of trying to change circumstances within a limiting timeline, you learn to shift your consciousness into timelines where your desired circumstances already exist. This is like the difference between trying to renovate a house while living in it versus simply moving to a house that already has everything you want. One approach involves struggle, time, and uncertainty. The other involves recognition, alignment, and immediate access to your desired experience. Timeline shifting incorporates every principle we've explored, but organizes them into a coherent process that eliminates the contradictions and limitations that often arise when these teachings are applied separately. Let me show you how each pillar contributes to the complete timeline shifting process. Neville's imagination becomes the navigation system that allows you to explore different timeline possibilities. Instead of imagining to create something new, you use imagination to scout existing timelines and identify the one that contains your desired reality. When you imagine living your ideal life, you're not just fantasizing, you're actually connecting your consciousness to the parallel timeline where that life already exists. This scouting process allows you to map the quantum territory and identify your target destination. Murphy's subconscious programming becomes the operating system that maintains your alignment with your chosen timeline. Your subconscious mind doesn't just create reality, it also determines which timeline reality you experience by maintaining consistent thought patterns, emotional frequencies, and behavioral habits. Timeline shifting involves reprogramming your subconscious to automatically maintain the internal patterns that correspond to your desired timeline, ensuring that you don't unconsciously drift back to limiting realities. Zealand's timeline navigation provides the structural understanding of how multiple realities exist simultaneously and how consciousness moves between them. However, timeline shifting expands this understanding by showing that you don't just slide between different variations of your current reality, you can make quantum leaps to completely different timeline configurations. This requires learning to recognize the pendulum patterns that keep you trapped in limiting timeline clusters and developing the awareness to navigate toward timeline streams that support your highest possibilities. Despenza's neuroplasticity and elevated emotions become the biological implementation mechanism that allows your brain and body to adapt to new timeline realities. When you shift between timelines, your neurology needs to update to match this new reality configuration. By generating the elevated emotional states that characterize your desired timeline, you are rewiring your brain to function optimally within that new reality. Your biology becomes the anchor that stabilizes your consciousness within your chosen timeline. Larson's quantum mechanics provide the scientific foundation that explains how timeline shifting is actually possible. Understanding that all possibilities exist simultaneously in quantum superposition gives you the confidence to attempt timeline shifts that might seem impossible from a conventional perspective. When you truly understand that your desired reality already exists in parallel form, timeline shifting becomes a matter of quantum alignment rather than hopeful manifestation. Traditional manifestation approaches often fail because they create internal conflict between your current reality and your desired outcomes. When you try to manifest wealth while feeling poor, or try to attract love while feeling unworthy, you're essentially broadcasting mixed signals that cancel each other out. Timeline shifting eliminates this conflict by helping you step into the complete identity configuration of the timeline where you already have what you desire. Instead of trying to feel abundant while surrounded by lack, timeline shifting teaches you to shift into the timeline where abundance is your natural state. Then allow your external circumstances to update to match that internal reality. This approach eliminates resistance because you're not fighting against your current circumstances. You're simply selecting a different timeline where those circumstances don't exist. Timeline shifting addresses the time delay problem that frustrates many manifestation students. Traditional approaches often require weeks, months, or years for desired changes to manifest because they're working against existing timeline momentum. Timeline shifting can produce immediate results because you're not creating new realities. You're accessing realities that already exist in complete form. Perhaps most importantly, timeline shifting transforms your relationship with personal power and possibility. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who needs to earn, deserve, or gradually develop your desired life, you recognize yourself as a conscious navigator with access to infinite timeline possibilities. This identity shift alone eliminates most of the internal blocks that prevent successful manifestation. The complete timeline shifting process integrates all 5 pillars into a seamless sequence that anyone can learn and apply. You begin by using imagination to scout and identify your target timeline. You then reprogram your subconscious to maintain alignment with that timeline's patterns. You develop the awareness to navigate away from limiting pendulum structures toward empowering timeline streams. You generate the elevated emotions that rewire your neurology to match your desired timeline. And finally, you apply quantum principles to make the actual shift between parallel realities. What emerges from this integration is not just another manifestation technique, but a complete technology for conscious reality navigation. You're no longer at the mercy of random circumstances or unconscious patterns. You become a master timeline architect with the ability to consciously design and experience any reality you can imagine. This is the natural evolution of human consciousness, the recognition that we are not passive observers of a fixed reality, but active navigators of infinite possibility. Now comes the moment where theory transforms into practice. Everything you've learned about the 5 pillars and timeline shifting synthesis converges into a single unified protocol that you can begin using immediately to navigate between realities. This master protocol represents the culmination of centuries of accumulated wisdom, distilled into a practical sequence that incorporates insights from every master teacher we've explored. What makes this protocol extraordinary is that each step amplifies and supports the others, creating what mathematicians call a synergistic effect, where the combined power exceeds the sum of individual parts. When you practice these 5 components together rather than separately, you create an exponential increase in your reality creation capabilities that makes seemingly impossible transformations feel natural and inevitable. Think of the master protocol as conducting a cosmic symphony where each pillar represents a different section of the orchestra. Individually, each section can create beautiful music, but when they all play together in perfect harmony, they create something transcendent that moves consciousness itself. This is an advanced understanding of manifestation that I'm teaching you. And if you can adopt these protocols, you can create any reality you want. Now, phase 1 is timeline scouting through sacred imagination. The protocol begins with Neville's foundation, using imagination not as a wishful fantasy, but as an advanced scouting system for exploring existing timeline possibilities. You start by constructing what Neville called an imaginal scene that implies your desire has already been fulfilled, but with crucial timeline shifting enhancement. You're not imagining to create something new. You're imagining to connect with a timeline where this reality already exists. Choose a specific scene that would naturally occur if you were already living your desired reality. If you want financial abundance, you might imagine checking your bank account and feeling genuine satisfaction at the substantial balance. If you desire a loving relationship, you might imagine a tender moment with your ideal partner. The key is selecting a scene that feels authentic and emotionally resonant to you personally. As you construct this scene, engage all your senses with precise detail. See the colors, hear the sounds, Feel the textures. Notice the scents. Experience the physical sensations. Here's the crucial timeline shifting element. As you build this scene, maintain the awareness that you're not creating fiction, but rather connecting your consciousness to an existing parallel reality where this scene is actually occurring right now. Now, phase 2 is subconscious timeline installation. Moving into Murphy's domain, you now program your subconscious mind to maintain alignment with this discovered timeline. The subconscious requires repetition, emotion, and relaxed receptivity to accept new programming. So this phase involves establishing the internal patterns that correspond to your target timeline, also including the process of using affirmations. As you continue holding your imaginal scene, you begin installing beliefs, thoughts, and emotional patterns that naturally characterize someone living that reality. If your scene involves financial abundance, notice what someone with genuine wealth thinks about money, how they feel about security, what they believe about their capabilities. Allow these patterns to settle into your subconscious as a natural way of thinking and feeling. The crucial insight here is that you're not trying to convince yourself of something untrue. You're downloading the consciousness configuration of the parallel version of yourself who already lives this reality. This eliminates the internal resistance that often blocks traditional affirmation techniques. Because you're not fighting against your current identity, you're expanding into a broader version of who you already are. The third phase is pendulum awareness and timeline navigation. Now you engage Zealand's contribution by developing the awareness needed to navigate toward your desired timeline while avoiding the pendulum patterns that could trap you in limiting realities. This phase involves recognizing and detaching from collective thought patterns that pull consciousness away from empowering timeline streams. The reason that most people can't do this is they are locked in to collective thought patterns created by mass media, by their family, by their culture, by their gender, by so many other things. And as you maintain your imaginal scene and its corresponding consciousness patterns, notice any thoughts or emotions that arise from collective programming. Doubts about whether you deserve this reality, fears about what others might think, concerns about economic conditions or social limitations. These are pendulum signals trying to pull you back into mass consciousness timelines characterized by struggle and limitation. Instead of fighting these patterns, simply observe them with neutral awareness and gently redirect your attention back to your target timeline. Think of this like being a skilled sailor who notices strong currents but doesn't get swept away by them. You acknowledge the collective patterns without allowing them to determine your individual navigation choices. A lot of us are just sailing on a boat with no understanding of the wind. Now, the fourth phase is neurological embodiment through elevated emotion. Drawing from Despenza's breakthrough research, as well as Neville Goddard's understanding of the feeling being the secret, you now generate the elevated emotional states that will rewire your neurology to function optimally within your desired timeline. This phase transforms your brain and body into biological foundations that naturally support your new reality. While maintaining your imaginal scene and timeline aligned consciousness patterns, begin cultivating the elevated emotions that would naturally characterize someone living this reality. Feel genuine gratitude for the fulfillment of your desires, even though they haven't yet manifested physically. Experience the joy, peace, excitement, or satisfaction that accompanies your imagined scene. The key understanding is that you're not trying to feel good about something you don't have. You're accessing the emotional signature of a parallel timeline where you do have it. These aren't artificial emotions imposed on unwilling circumstances, but authentic feelings that arise from connecting with existing realities. As you maintain these elevated states, your brain begins building the neural networks that naturally exist in people who live these realities. The fifth phase is quantum consciousness alignment and timeline transition. So finally, you apply Larson's quantum principles to complete the actual transition between parallel realities. This phase involves aligning your consciousness so precisely with your target timeline that you naturally collapse into that quantum state of existence. With your imaginal scene vivid, your subconscious aligned, your navigation clear, and your emotions elevated, you now make the quantum shift by fully embodying the consciousness of your parallel self who already lives this reality. This isn't pretending. It's a complete identity alignment where you genuinely recognize yourself as the person who has already achieved everything you desire. Feel yourself settling into this identity like putting on perfectly fitted clothing. Notice how this version of yourself thinks, feels, perceives, and responds to life. Allow your consciousness to rest completely in this expanded sense of who you are. From this aligned state, the quantum field naturally reorganizes itself to reflect your new consciousness configuration. When all five phases operate together, they create something far more powerful than any single technique could achieve. Your imagination provides the navigation coordinates. Your subconscious maintains the trajectory. Your awareness keeps you on course. Your emotions provide the fuel, and your quantum consciousness completes the transition. Each element supports and amplifies the others until timeline shifting becomes as natural as breathing. The beautiful thing about the master protocol is that it works whether you believe in parallel realities or not. If you approach it as advanced psychology, you're reprogramming your mind for success. If you approach it as quantum mechanics, you're shifting between probable realities. If you approach it as spiritual practice, you're aligning with divine will. The protocol transcends belief systems because it works with fundamental principles of consciousness that operate regardless of your philosophical framework. As you practice this master protocol consistently, you will discover that reality becomes increasingly responsive to your intentions. What once seemed like impossible dreams begins manifesting with surprising ease. Opportunities align with perfect timing. People and resources appear exactly when needed. You'll realize that you haven't learned to manipulate reality, you've remembered how to collaborate with it consciously. You have not simply learned in this activation new information. You have been initiated into an ancient lineage of reality creators that stretches back through the centuries of human evolution. The knowledge flowing through your awareness right now from listening to this connects you to every mystic who discovered imagination's creative power, every researcher who mapped the subconscious's mind programming capabilities, every teacher who recognized consciousness as the fundamental creative force of existence. What makes this moment extraordinary is that you now stand at the convergence point where thousands of years of accumulated wisdom meets the cutting-edge understanding of modern science. The mystics of ancient Egypt intuited these principles through direct spiritual experience. Today's quantum physicists are proving them through mathematical equations and laboratory experiments. You've inherited both the mystical knowing and the scientific validation, creating a foundation for reality creation that has never before been available to humanity. Consider the remarkable journey you've completed with these few minutes together. You began by understanding that consciousness itself is a fundamental creative force that shapes all experience. You discovered how 5 master teachers each contributed essential pieces to the complete puzzle of reality creation. You learned to integrate imagination's creative power, subconscious programming, timeline navigation, neurological embodiment, and quantum mechanics into a unified system that amplifies each component exponentially. Most importantly, you have moved beyond the limitations of traditional manifestation approaches that often create internal conflict and produce inconsistent results. Through timeline shifting, you now understand that you're not trying to change circumstances within a fixed reality, but rather navigating between infinite parallel realities that already contain every possible version of your life. This understanding eliminates the struggle and resistance that blocks most manifestation attempts because you're working with the natural structure of consciousness rather than against it. You now possess the complete toolkit for reality architecture. You understand the historical lineage that validates these principles across centuries and cultures. You comprehend the scientific mechanisms that explain how consciousness creates physical experience through neuroplasticity, quantum mechanics, and electromagnetic field interactions. You have learned the practical master protocol that allows you to apply this understanding immediately in your daily life. And most significantly, you've undergone a fundamental identity transformation. You no longer see yourself as someone who hopes to learn manifestation techniques or someone who struggles to change unwanted circumstances. You now recognize yourself as a conscious reality creator with access to infinite timeline possibilities. You're not a victim of random events or limiting circumstances. You're a navigator of infinite possibility with the wisdom and tools needed to create any experience you can imagine. This identity shift represents more than personal empowerment. It positions you as a part of humanity's evolutionary awakening to its creative core. The knowledge you now carry comes with both privilege and responsibility. You have access to understanding that can transform not only your individual life, but also contribute to the collective awakening of human consciousness. As you apply these principles and demonstrate their effectiveness, through your own transformation, you become a living example that inspires others to remember their own creative power. This is not the end of your journey with reality creation. It is the beginning of a completely new understanding of existence itself. You now have the foundation needed to explore infinite possibilities, to experiment with consciousness in ways that previous generations could only dream of, and to contribute to the ongoing evolution of humanity and its understanding about the nature of reality and consciousness. Every time you practice the master protocol, every moment you consciously navigate between timelines, every experience you create through elevated consciousness, you are adding to the collective field of knowledge that future generations will inherit. You're not just learning from the masters who came before you. You are becoming a master whose discoveries will guide those who come after you. Trust in the profound capabilities that you have awakened within yourself. Trust in the ancient wisdom that flows through your consciousness. Trust in the scientific validation that proves these principles work according to measurable laws. Most importantly, trust in your natural birthright as a conscious creator of reality. You are no longer a student of reality creation. You are a practitioner of reality architecture with unlimited access to infinite possibility. Welcome to your new identity as a conscious navigator of timeline realities. The universe is waiting to respond to your clear intention with precision, abundance, and perfect timing. Your journey as a master timeline architect begins now. You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.